Good morning. I'm Govini, which is one of the student in TDDD27, and for the project of the advanced web programming, and my topic is use for food. And most likely, before we start to present our concept, I would likely to demonstrate about the logic flow. And most probably you would have many of the ingredients that will be rendering in your brain. For example, you want to eat the cake or whatever um, and you don't know what taste of the cake that you want to taste in the coming dinner or lunch, so that you should use my apps for finding the cuisine throughout the API called Admin, which is a very famous API framework in the world, and they will suggest a menu of different cuisine to you. And afterward, if they have some cuisine have found, and they will suggest they will give the suggested cuisine choice to the server, the API called Tomato, and which is they will provide different locations for the cuisine that you choose. And most probably, if you didn't have the cuisine that you found, they will return as 404 pages. And afterward, if they have some location that have been found, and the submitter will be automatically return the latitude and the longitude in the Google Map format. Okay, and I think it's better to demonstrate the concept through the Firefox right now. And this is the interface of our project. And most probably, you can search your cuisine throughout these more boxes, searching boxes, or in the advanced search column. And I will demonstrate two concepts separately. And most probably, and in here process, for example, I just type in the kit in here, and they have three different choices for given to me, which is the caramel cake and the reference cake ball and the glass orange pound cake respectively. And most likely, because the users may don't know which ingredients inside of the specific cuisine. For example, the caramel cake, they didn't know what is this making for. So that I have given some ingredient for them for giving them to reference. And this type of informations are all provided by the admin API as I showed before. And most probably, the users can choose the locations that they want to go in for. For example, they are going on trip and they want to taste the caramel cake in London. For example, in here. And I just find the caramel cake in London and then find the restaurant. And most probably, they will showing two choices to sell the caramel cake, which is called London Review Cake Shop, and also the coffee cake and cheese. Yeah, in this two specific place properly. And you can click on the icon in here. They will show about the exact locations of what they are belongs to. And most probably, you can know more information for click in this button. Yeah. And this is the most simple versions for searchings. And now I'm going to demonstrate the advanced versions, because I know that some of the users may care about their health. For example, they want to set about the calories and also the health label specifications in here. Yeah, and yeah, and you want to know more about the API scoring, and you can click this button. And first of all, you can click about the ingredient name. For example, I click cake in here. And for example, I just want to find the cake will have the calories from 100 to 500. And I don't want peanuts on the cake. And throughout these specifications, we can search this type of particular selections throughout the admin API. And they will also provide this type of choice to you. The caramel cake Malibka garden kit, and also the lemon ice kit. Ice cream, yeah, something. And most probably here I would likely to find about the for example, I want to eat the lemon ice cream in Sydney. Yep, and let me find a restaurant. Yep, and here they will suggest some restaurant for you in the Sydney respectively, and yeah, and so that the users can choose their choice more very easily. And most probably, I would also like to demonstrate about the help pages, which is the Q&A pages. And these pages are mainly using the Vue.js routing for demonstrates about the effects. And most probably, you can create about the column lists, and it will show about the questions that I think that most of the people were asking, and it will be separate in the TDDD27 sessions and also the technical Q&A sessions. And this is using the routing effect so that to making the front end process run very smoothly. And next, I would likely to demonstrate about the viral effects of the surgeons. And most popularly is not frequently to find the right choices in the real daily life. And for example, haha, I'm just realized that there didn't have any food which calls haha in the world. And let me know what is happening if I really search haha in the searching column. And unfortunately, you will see that they didn't find any of the haha in the admin API. And yep, and a part of the admin API for the Zomato API, they would have something similar. And I would likely to figure out all the error cases and return all the error pages to the 404 pages so that the user know what is happening, and is further ensure that this type of error is because the API cannot find any of the cuisine instead of my cook have some errors, so that this type of operation that I should done in our projects. Yeah, and and first of all, I will search about the ingredient. I will search carrot, for example, and I was 10 calories and 1000, and also peanut free in here. And they were it is very weird that they will show you about the carrot harrows, and I'm just remember that if you find a carrot harrow in the street Sydney, and they will have some the Zomato API would cannot find any of restaurant regarding to the carrot harrow in the street Sydney, and here I would likely to show about the effect. Yeah, you can see that because of the JSONs, they cannot find any of the JSONs file from the but they cannot find any of results from the Zomato server, so that they finally return now JSONs to us, and then when our apps had detected the JSONs is now, and I would likely to return about the 404 page in here. And most probably and that's all for the functions demonstrating. And here I would likely to talk more about the architectures about my projects. And let me if bigger. And most probably for the front end designs, we would using the ES dot for front end documentations, and also using the Vue.js as their front end supporting framework. And for the Beautify.js, which is one of the schematic component framework, which they were supporting Google Material. I had applied the Beautify.js in our projects, but not limited to using that. I was also using for making some highly reusable components instead of just using the Beautify.js and make the component can be reused again and make the front end would be much more better. And more likely, the Beautify.js would also support the routing effect instead of installing another library which is very popular called realrouter.js, and the Beautify.js would be self-included this type of the plugin, and I think it's a very powerful framework, yeah, for the front-end development, and they will imply the Google Material Designs. And for the backend designs, I'm using PHP and just using the code initer for the MVC approaches, for the data flow, and retrieving the JSON file and all of the backend operations, and also all the RESTful operations. I will do it in the code initer. And probably I will use the deoxygens for the backend documentations, and the package support I will using the composers, which had many of the plugin. For example, I would download the PHP unit throughout the composers, and so that it will be easy to add in the plugin to our projects much more easily. And the PHP unit is just using for the backend unit testings. And for the configurations and also the SVM, I was using the npm, the package managers from Node.js. And this is for the front-end designing. And for the back-end part, I would actually I was just send about the curl request and to the admin server respectively, and the admin server will just return me JSON file, and then I just use the JSON file and make them more useful and represent it in a material way, as you know the process that I showed before. And most probably for the Zomato server, after the admin server has searched different type of cuisines, and the cuisines and the locations have been sent to the Zomato server and found the particular restaurants which is suitable for the requirements from the admin servers, and then they just return back the JSONs back to the code initer, and then I do some type of supportings, for example, for input it into the Google Map API and input it in a card format as I showed before. And for the cloud deployment, I'm likely for using the Heroku for the cloud server support, and for the servers support, I will using the Jenkins, which is a very useful tools for automatically do the automatically monitoring and the integrations. And most probably in here, I would likely to discuss about some interesting algorithms and challenges. And for the ingredient search, I think is one of the very interesting part that I want to show about. As well as the ingredient form is very interesting, as I show to the at the left hand side, and you will see that they will return the JSONs in a very specific format, and they will return it in different line one in different receipt, so that they will expect that every receipt would have line one, and then they were using the line one as a header instead of using different receipt, so that it's quite difficult to format it and adapt it into another framework or another UI components, so that the job that I want to solve this situation is get the data throughout this format, and also mix the discrete pieces, as well as it show that as line 1 and line 2 into one receipt format, and then represent in the receipt form. And I think it's better to show about the data and easy to control it. And And for the algorithm, I would likely to show about that the algorithm that I want to show, and as well as they have two for loop for loading about the ingredient array. That means the ingredient array will be grab the data from different ingredient line and put it into the 2D array in here. And yeah, so that the ingredient array, the eyes at the first layer of the ingredient array is just it's just storing about the data about the first receipt. For example, if the first layer of the array is 0 in here, they just add back the the 0 the 0 layer of the array back to the receipt one. And then to do this type of stuff for receipt 1 and receipt 2 and receipt 3, and then to merge it together. And finally, the receipt will be showing in one receipt in each layer instead of they are discrete. And I think this type of algorithm I can show it in the real code for about my work. Most popularly is on the eAPI, and you will see that the object header will show in here, and I will using the ingredient array for storing about the hit, receipt, and the ingredient line, and put it into the ingredient array. And I will using the define use 3 variables for storing about the ingredients, each ingredients, and store it into one receipt, and then to merge it together throughout these sessions, and then return to sessions for the welcome.php, which is the welcome PHP is controller here for the MVC development in here, which is a controller for MVC development. And the controller will have different type of things for loading about the view in here. And let me talk more about the eAPI format first. And most probably they would loading about the food. I had created a food object in here for storing about the content, and also to get the contents throughout the food object, so that make the program is much more OO. And most probably they would have the eAPI, as I made the concept, made the object in terms of eAPI format. And the eAPI would support different type of call, as well as they will have the API call functions for going to have a curl request to the server, and as well as they will have some default arguments have been given, as well as the users may be searching the regarding information throughout the simple and naive searching format instead of the advanced format, so that I should provide some default arguments before the user do the for the user for doing the naive searchings. And this is the statement header, and I just call the data, make the URL throughout these functions inside the API request.php. And as well as the eAPI is extended from the API request, so that it has an inheritance relations regarding on. And most probably you can see the API request format, and they will send about the current initialize and set operations, and then send the current execution statement, and then they just return us a JSON file in here. And so that the eAPI, and then the link that URL will be stored about the JSON file, and then I will likely to decode it for the PHP users throughout this object header variable. And this is for the API call. And most probably back to the welcome.php, and every object would need the API calls for the object headers, so that if the user have just using the naive versions, they were just using these methods for calling is okay. If the user have used the advanced versions method, they will the argument is very long, and they are just calling the API call functions in the eAPI, as I showed before. This one, they will call these functions in here. And most probably the object header would become the argument for the receive request and the image request, and also for the ingredient search. Yeah, as well as in here, ingredient search. And the algorithm that is interesting for discuss, which is one of the part in the ingredient search file in here. Yeah. And I think it's a very interesting ideas they want to demonstrate. And most probably, and they will just return the data in terms of the data array in here, and then I will load back the data into the PHP view, which is the form, the view which is called form in here. Yeah. So that you would know about the data from image, array, and the label. Yeah, and they will push it into this free array, and they are just using the eAPI in here. They are just using the data sorry, they were just using the data from sorry, let me find from welcome.php, and the data will have show it in different array in here, and then to load back into the form PHP, and as well they will load it in the for each functions, and then load it back into this array, and then show it throughout this for loop. And this is the car part. As you know, the receipt have been shown in this part, and most probably, yeah, this is for the eAPI functions is going on. And here you will see that I have used many of the reusable components, and for example in here, yeah, and they are just related to the index.js. Sorry. Index.js. Here, and load back the data from here, so that this is the navigation bar, and I will likely to load back the navigation bar for here. And most probably this is the part of the form part. And yep, and before I go to the second discussions, I would likely to discuss more about the ESET API, which is for singing about the Zomato API, and as well as they would know about the locations view in the view format, in the view components part in the code initers. And as well as the users have been choose about different task options and different places. Yeah, this variable is then they will show different places. For example, they choose Sydney in here, and then they just choose the particular cuisine, and then they will load back in the ESET API. Set API in here. Yeah, they also belongs to the API request methods. Classes, And one of the methods which is using the same Zomato server, which is just grabbing the informations from the Zomato server and then just return the JSONs to the particular controllers for manage about the data. And this is also one of the part that I want to discuss in here, which is the indexations of Zomato API. And as far as they would likely to include with the specific ID and find the specific, and as well as they would likely to find the request location headers in here. They want to find the locations, for example, in London. They just want to find the restaurant in London, but they cannot directly to put the paste London throughout the Zomato API. So that I will just send the JSON request from the London, which is called London, and then they just return me a JSONs, and which is a specific ID, for example, which is called 041GCFS in here. And these specific IDs can is one of the indexations for the particular city instead of just using the keyword Londons. And I think it's a very interesting point that the user intestations, maybe they just want to less raise the memory or for the optimizations or something like that. And most probably, if they found about the specific ID, they will send the particular specific ID to the Zomato and find the specific restaurants throughout the requirement result. And let me see about the effect. And most probably they will call a same Zomato service, which is include all the things in the same Zomato API. And most probably they will they will find out about the headers of the locations first. For example, I just put London in here, and they will just doing the JSON searchings to find about the indexations ID first. And most probably the source locations is in is in the API request. That I just wondering about this these methods for doing the curl request, and you will see that they would have their coding is quite different, as well as the structure is much difficult than the admin API. And they are doing different headers and set operations and then to execute them, and then they just return the data back to the set API in here, and the buffer locations will be load back about the about the JSONs that these functions have been returned, and then to crack it, and so that this location ID will be something which is in hexadecimal format. And most probably after they find the locations ID, they can really for doing the real work, which is using the search entity ID which is given by the server of them, and then they just replace about the cuisines in here, and then to do the API functions and call it the curl request in API request again in here. And most probably for loading back the user API functions, and then they can here it will be doing about some data cracking and load back about the address, latitude, ratings, outlook, and place names particularly, and then to store in the data array as well as the eAPI and load back into real. So that you can see that in the locations two API functions, it's just something like in the eAPI is similar like that, but the format will be much different in the user API here, and as well as they would know about the data yeah, in the string format, and I think it will look more elegant than the just using the EAP, just using the API, and then for learning about the functions called card printings. Yeah, this is the functions for working about the string in here, and then they will print the card in here, so that they will know about the card functions throughout these small functions. And most probably for the Google Map part. And the Google Map part will be just yeah, as well as in this SM, they will know better about um, the the PHP format um, data, and they were using the JSON file for the RESTful call, and then they will plug it into the Google Map lettering, and then to show it by listener, and you will see that they would particularly to show it in the Google Map as I showed in the previously. Yeah. And as well as there's the backend codings, and here I would likely to demonstrate about more about the that's the algorithm for the location identifications, and I showed before so that I didn't show it again. And for error handling, I think it's also a very interesting part that I want to discuss, as well as the JSON's return errors for both Zomato and Elements are quite different. And you will see that for the element.json is much easier, and element do a very good job for the developer for detect about the errors. But for the Zomato, they will return it as an array, so that I think yeah, to crack the errors for the Zomato is very different. So that we need to check about the address as the locations about the address zero, instead of just checking about the number of hit in here. And then if they will check, then the address now zero in here is now, and they will just return into the 404 pages, and the code will be look like that. Let me see. And I would likely to show about how to run in the test cases, and this is the PHP file for running about the backend app servers. And for example, for the eAPI, yeah, for the eAPI format, they will know it in here. ESET API format, yeah, and also the eAPI format will be know it in here. And I will run about the test again and see the result about the testings. And I'm just using the PHP unit, and you will see in here I'm just using and all the tests have already passed, and you can check the code in here. And I want to show that about I'm just using the dictionary classes for loading about the a very long string in here. I'm just using dictionary for storing the string, so that the string will be look like not so long in here. And this is for the test.php part. And for the Jenkins, yep, and I already storing about the Jenkins. And these sessions have already implemented into my project, and show all the successful build and all the fail build in here. And they just said that, oh, they have some fail build in here, and successful build is in here, or something like that, and keep track all the link from the Git. And I think it's quite interesting for using yeah for using Jenkins for doing the automatic continue integrations. And for the cloud server, I'm just using the Heroku. And most probably you will see that the activities measures deploy history or something like that. Throughout the Heroku activities, yeah, something like that. And I think, yeah, and that's the thing that I have learned from the TDDD27, and I hope, yeah, this project, although that will have some limitations. For example, yeah, it may not work in Sweden, and also the admin API only support 5 requests per minute. But I didn't think, yeah, this is a very serious problem, as well as you can buy the applications versions or for the business versions, so that this type of problem can be omitted if you have money. Yeah, and that's all for the project presentations for the TDD27. Thank you very much.